Good morning. I'm Hassan Giordano, and this is your DMV Daily Dose for Friday, January 17th, 2020.
It's currently clear and 28 degrees in Baltimore. Expect mostly clear skies starting tonight. Today's high will be 33 degrees, and the low will be 24.
Josh Kurtz of Maryland Matters was reporting that Ben Smith, who had served as executive director of the Maryland Democratic Party since December of 2018, has resigned. Smith, who originally got elected as chair of the Baltimore City Democratic State Central Committee back in September of 2018, quickly resigned from that position in December upon taking a position as the party's executive director when Maya Rockeymoore Cummins was elected as the Maryland State Party leader. However, after Cummins resigned late last year to run for the vacant congressional district seat following the death of her husband, Congressman Elijah Cummins, it appeared that the writing was on the wall for Smith's departure after the party elected Yvette Lewis as the next party leader just last month. Now, Lewis told Democratic leaders of Smith's decision in an email Thursday obtained by Maryland Matters. Lewis said that she was grateful for Smith's service, but offered no details about his departure. It is said that she has a chosen successor already in mind, but it will not announce that person until later on. Now, Maryland Matters' Danielle Gaines is reporting that top Montgomery County officials asked the State Board of Elections to allow them to opt out of an expanded Election Day wireless network on Thursday, citing concerns about cost and security. In a joint letter to the board, Montgomery County Exec Mark Ehrlich, County Council President Sidney Katz, and Council Vice President Tom Hucker said that they believe the network is unnecessary and could be vulnerable to cybersecurity attacks. Quote, "We do not think that this is an appropriate use of county funds, and we do not support funding this project." Staff at the State Board of Elections have proposed expanding wireless networks in the state's 6 largest jurisdictions, which include Baltimore City and Baltimore County, Anne Arundel County, Howard County, Montgomery, and Prince George's counties. Now, the networks could be used to transmit real-time voter registration changes from electronic poll books at about 1,300 precincts to the state elections office in Annapolis on Election Day. The state's shift to same-day voter registration prompted this expansion. Previously, wireless networks were only used at early voting sites. The jurisdictions that are being required to install the networks are also required to pay for them as well, at about $1,300 per precinct. Now, Montgomery County officials put their cost at about $365,000. At a meeting on the State Board on Thursday, Montgomery's Deputy Director of Elections, Allison McClellan, asked the State Board to grant the county a waiver from the wireless network requirement before election judge training begins on January 24th. Now, Maryland Matters is also reporting on Maryland House Republicans who unveiled a package of bills yesterday targeting violent crime and transparency that will aim to tackle what Minority Leader Nicholas Kippy, a Republican from Anne Arundel County, describes as a violent crime crisis. Baltimore City may be ground zero for the plague of violent crime, but this is not just a city problem, said Delegate Kippy during a news conference in Annapolis, citing increases in homicides in Baltimore County and a growing number of sex crimes in Montgomery County. At the news conference, Kippy and House Minority Whip Kathy Szeliga, a Republican from Baltimore County, announced the caucus's intention to rally behind several pieces of legislation designed to decrease crime rates and increase judicial transparency across the board. This includes Stopping Dangerous and Violent Criminal Acts of 2020, Protecting Marylanders from Violent Crime Act of 2020, the Gun Theft is a Felony Act of 2020, Victim Empowerment and Plea Deals Act of 2020, Cameras in the Courtroom Act of 2020, and Truth in Plea Deals Act of 2020. There's a whole lot of acts for 2020, being proposed by this Republican caucus. Now, make sure you go over to Maryland Matters in order to get the full scope of the legislation being introduced by this Republican caucus, and on this article and the articles that I've mentioned in this report. Now, the Afro and Deborah Bailey is reporting on students, alumni, friends, and advocates of Maryland's 4 HBCUs who gathered in recent weeks with a new plan of action to ensure that the state of Maryland complies with court orders to address an historic pattern of discrimination that impacts Bowie State University, Coppin State University, Morgan State University, and the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, and it has done so for decades. Quote, the Maryland HBCU Coalition is sponsoring a series of town halls, and we are taking our case directly to the legislative leaders and the people of Maryland, said Sharon Blake, a spokesperson for Maryland HBCU advocates. Now, the most recent town hall was held at the Reginald F. Lewis Museum in downtown Baltimore. More than 150 participants from all parts of Maryland packed the museum's theater to demand the state settle the case for an equitable sum. Backed by promises of new state legislation this year to settle the decades-long court case, advocates of the state's HBCUs said it's time for the state of Maryland to provide funding to the HBCUs to end the segregated system of higher education, which continues to perpetuate, according to the 2013 ruling handed down by U.S. District Court Judge Catherine Blake. Fern Chin and the Baltimore Brew have continuing coverage of what's being dubbed Delegate Gate 2020. The situation surrounding the recent Central Committee vote to appoint a new state delegate in the city's 45th district. Now, remember, we reported on this Monday night and on Tuesday's DMV Daily Dose about the Central Committee coming up with a vote to appoint Chanel Branch as the next state delegate for the 45th district. Well, 2 45th District residents have delivered a letter to Baltimore Democratic leaders on Wednesday night at their regularly scheduled monthly meeting, alleging that process of filling a House of Delegates vacancy violated party bylaws, and it's calling for a revote. Quote, I think the process was flawed and change is needed, said Doris Minor Terrell, president of the Broadway East Neighborhood Association, after handing the 2-page letter to Corinthia Barber, the chair of the Baltimore City Democratic State Central Committee. Now, the letter describes half a dozen alleged violations, most related to Monday's, at times tumultuous 45th District Central Committee meeting held to fill the vacancy created by the resignation of Delegate Cheryl Glenn, who is facing federal bribery and wire fraud charges. Now, Terrell said Barbara did not tell her the next steps to be taken on the letter, which asked that the governor, Larry Hogan, and the Maryland Democratic Party, as well as the Baltimore City Democratic State Central Committee, reject the nomination and do the vote all over again. Terrell said that she and the other person who signed the letter, Miss Rita Cruz, who's the president of the Bel Air Edison Neighborhood Association and an outspoken advocate and community leader across the city of Baltimore, are both circulating this letter to other 45th District residents as they attempt to gather more signatures. Now, Governor Larry Hogan's office has received several complaints by local leaders calling for a redo vote. He has until January 30th to confirm or reject the nomination of Chanel Branch as the district's next state delegate. If he rejects her name, it would then be sent back to the members of the 45th District Central Committee, and they would have to then vote again. Now, speaking of elections, the Baltimore Sun is reporting that the 3 candidates for Baltimore City Council president have each amassed more than $50,000 in campaign funds ahead of the first competitive race for the position in nearly a decade. Campaign finance reports, due for the first time this election cycle this past Wednesday, showed that 13th District Councilwoman Shannon Sneed is leading the pack with more than $122,000 cash on hand, thanks in large part to a financial boost she received from several of her council members in organized labor. Delegate Nick Mosby, a former Baltimore City councilman and the current state delegate for the 40th District, who's also a candidate for position, had nearly $82,000 in his campaign coffers as of the fundraising deadline, while Councilman Leon Pinkett, who represents the council on the 7th District, trailed both candidates with about $56,783 cash on hand. Now, with Council President Brandon Scott running for mayor, the council president seat is due to be vacated during this upcoming election. Now, the 2020 Democratic primary will be the first time sitting elected officials have faced off against one another for the council president seat since Stephanie Rawlings Blake won the seat in 2007. The race for comptroller is also heating up as incumbent comptroller Joan Pratt faces her first challenger in the past almost 2 decades, and she has raised $365,463 cash on hand currently, her finance reports show. Challenger Bill Henry, a councilman for the 4th District, has $104,551 cash on hand. Now, as mentioned, Pratt hasn't had a primary challenger from 1999 to 2016 and entered this race with a substantial amount of cash and raised an additional $104,850 over the past year. Henry, who represents North and Northeast Baltimore in the city council in its 4th district and has represented it since 2007, has raised more than $172,000. Now, I'm your man, Mr. Politics, and this has been your DMV Daily Dose for Friday, January 17th, 2020. Don't forget that Monday, this is the last report before our MLK Day Congressional Day debate, which will be happening on Monday, January 20th from 5:30 to 8 p.m. Now, tickets are sold out over there at Soul Harvest Baptist Church, where we'll be having it, 2901 Drew Park Drive, but you can watch the live stream debate right there on our Facebook page at DMV Daily News, as well as on the Value My Vote 2020 Facebook page at Value My Vote 2020. We'll also be streaming it live on the DMV Daily News YouTube page. Now, for more information on that or the articles that I've mentioned this morning, just go on over to our website at www.dmvdaily.news.